Part 2, we're back, of course, talking FF7. We're talking some Rebirth. We're talking a good chunk of Part 3. So we're looking at that panel Q&A thing that Hamaguchi and Kitase did in Boulevard City over in Riyadh and stuff like that. The Esports World Cup exhibition thing that we've been talking about here lately. I don't even know what all information's out there. For one, I haven't looked at the video. Normally, we would break down the video. That's what we usually do on the channel. But to be honest, it's quite long. Like, if you go to the Kadia Gaming Twitch, the VOD for the panel is like 2.5 hours. And if you go to like the VOD that's on the Square Enix channel that Hamaguchi tweeted out, that's itself is like 2 hours. Point is, it'd be a really long video to make, and it would take a long time to make it, because I have to, even if I just sat there and watched it, I'd be sitting here for 2 fucking hours just watching the damn thing, much less stopping every couple of minutes to like talk about stuff. It's a lot easier just to kind of like talk about the information that's out there, because there's a lot of people that have already been tweeting a bunch of stuff from this panel. I'm not saying we won't look at the VOD, because we might do that in the next like day or so or something in the upcoming week or whatever. Because I tend to find things interesting that people don't, and the things I want to talk about that I found intriguing from like these Q&As and panels that other people wouldn't like consider good information, if that makes any sense. So we might do that. But for now, I think it's just like easier to look at all the curated information that's already out there. As I mentioned previously, it is a lot of Part 3 stuff. They talked quite a bit about Part 3, actually. It's kind of surprisingly. And it's something I've really liked so far with the marketing post-Rebirth, is they're talking a lot about the next game, even if they're not like giving away a lot of shit, obviously. It's so much more than we got from like Remake to Rebirth. Like, we got a little bit of stuff every now and then. They'd give us a little something on Part 2. But we are not that far from whenever Rebirth came out. And they are constantly talking about Part 3 in some capacity, whether they're just like talking about the Highwind or the open world or something along those lines, right? But again, they gave us quite a bit of Part 3. They've actually talked about like the development of the Highwind mechanics and kind of where they're at on that right now. It's kind of interesting, man. So we're just going to hop right into it. Full credit goes to Shinra Arch. We're just going to be looking at their fucking wall of tweets they have since yesterday. So let's just jump right into it. FF7 Rebirth director Naoki Hamaguchi says that there is another aspect of the gameplay you'll be able to access from the Highwind. Do something new and special while you're riding around on it. Now, they chose to use a picture of Chadley here. I don't know if that actually matters. Hopefully, maybe that means that like Chadley's on the airship and we can just throw him off of it and get rid of him for the rest of the game. That'd be pretty special. As for what it could actually be, I mean, it's hard to know, right? We're like in unprecedented territory because we've had airships in the past in the franchise, and you can, depending on the game, you can like go onto the airship and walk around and interact with characters. But this is like a modern Final Fantasy game, PS5, Unreal Engine 4 and 5, and it's like, and we're able to fly around the world for the first time in the franchise for a long time, right? We're able to actually traverse the whole world on the airship. So I don't know what it could be. I've seen like some of the replies they have to this tweet. Some people suggested like aerial battles, like fighting. We're kind of on the run from Shinra. Maybe flying around, you can interact with like things in the air and fight or something. It'd be kind of cool, I guess. Other than that, I have no idea. It's hard to even speculate right now. FF7 Rebirth director Naoki Hamaguchi says you'll be able to travel the world around the Highwind. Since it's kind of weird, I don't know. He says the prototyping and experimenting on the Highwind has reached quite the level now. So this update is talking about on like the development of the Highwind mechanics or whatever. Wherever they're at right now in that, it's in a good spot apparently, which is kind of insane to think about considering we are not even quite half a year from Rebirth's release, right? Like they're already pretty good spot on developing the Highwind mechanics. And while I do appreciate some Highwind updates and stuff like that, I also need some updates on the submarine. What's up with the ocean? What's up with traversing the fucking ocean floor? Asked if we can expect Tifa to suplex enemies in Part 3, Hamaguchi says they do want to show more of Tifa in the third game and different aspects of her as a strong and powerful character. Can't guarantee that she'll suplex someone, but they'll look into it. So this one is one that I could see kind of from both sides, because there's part of me that wants to see that shit in the next game. I want to see Tifa, fucking suplex a kaiju. At the end of the game, we're probably going to be fighting FF7R or something like that, maybe a different name. And seeing Tifa suplex a god in the remake project would be pretty cool, kind of a callback to the original game, right? But at the same time, it's not really realistic. And it is a fantasy game. I know people don't like the term realistic, but it's not something we've seen her doing. She's a strong character. She's physically strong, right? But her being able to like lift one of the weapons of the planet or being able to lift up FF7R for a suplex would be kind of ridiculous. But again, I do kind of want to see it. They further add, he says you can look forward to seeing more of Tifa since Vincent and Sid will be controllable. He says to look forward to what synergy attacks with those two characterful guys, as well as a completely new game system and how Tifa interacts with that too. So part of that's not necessarily like new information, because obviously we already know Sid and Vincent are going to be controllable characters, and then like Tifa having like synergy attacks with them is not really a surprise, because I think with Rebirth, unless I'm wrong, like pretty much every character has some sort of a synergy attack with every other character, right? I don't know if they all have like unique synergy attacks between them, but there's like the bodyguard synergy attack that I think most of the characters share, right? So that's not really a surprise. But the new gameplay mechanic tease is kind of interesting. Again, we can't really speculate what that could be, other than like synergy limit breaks, which we've been talking about for like a long time. Rebirth director Hamaguchi says he does want to include Queen's Blood in the third game, but he also wants to tweak it and evolve it in a certain way to make it a newer and fresher experience. He also says if he has to change the music, it'll just be a newer arrangement. So Queen's Blood in the third game is something we talked about quite a bit. It's something they've talked about a lot post-Rebirth. It's a very popular minigame, so of course they're going to bring it back in the third game. I don't know how you alter it or tweak it, other than, like, a suggestion I've seen is just making the board bigger, right? Add more zones. And which would work, I guess, because that would make the games last a little bit longer, a little more strategic. Obviously, the cards that you introduce, they can do kind of anything. You can make any card, like, take any amount of zones from any distance and increase or decrease, like, attack power and shit like that or whatever. Like, it's kind of hard to, like, suggest what, like, cards could do. But in terms of, like, the gameplay itself, definitely, like, making the board bigger would help a little bit, I think, maybe. Actually, another just kind of random suggestion I was thinking of is having some sort of, like, outside game mechanic. If you go to, like, the Fort Condor minigame, you obviously have, like, your deck sort of thing that you use your troops or whatever. But you also have spells, right? They're, like, one-time uses. So maybe something along those lines a little bit with Queen's Blood. Some sort of, like, ability. And it kind of reminiscent of Gwent a bit. If you guys have played Gwent in Witcher 3, like, whatever your deck is, and, like, your deck leader card, it has, like, some sort of ability that you can use, like, one time or whatever, essentially. Something along those lines would be kind of cool. I guess essentially like a deck leader card, right, that has an ability. Like, maybe you can play the card, maybe you can't, it doesn't really matter, but just have some sort of ability that you can kind of activate whenever you want or need to. And also, just kind of a throwback to, like, Final Fantasy, like, 8 and 9, I just want the ability to just play a lot of people. Like, I feel like we don't get that much in Rebirth. A lot of the matches you play are just tied to, like, the storyline for Queen's Blood, which the storyline was cool for what it was, but I just miss the days of when you went to, like, a new town and, like, those older Final Fantasy games, and you could probably play, like, half the people there sometimes, you know? You could play a lot of fucking people in each town. It's pretty cool. Hamaguchi says he may give away some spoilers, and he really shouldn't, but he asks everyone who's played the original Final Fantasy VII to think about the section in the original story that will be covered by the third part of the series. Hamaguchi says when he thinks of that part of the story, there are two things that come to mind: the Highwind and snowboarding. There are a lot of other elements as well, but the key elements that really resonate have to be at the core of the gameplay experience. It's kind of interesting, like, I can agree with, like, half of what Hamaguchi says, because when I do think about what's coming up in the next game, of course I'm thinking about the Highwind, because that's, like, one of the best parts of every old Final Fantasy is getting the ability to fly around the world. I can't say that when I'm thinking of the third game, like, the first thing I'm thinking of or whatever is, like, snowboarding. I just never had that much of an attachment to the minigame. It's more of, like, a meme in the community anyways. It's like, Aerith dies, and then we go snowboarding. Like, we're sad that she's dead, but here we are fucking snowboarding down a mountain. More so, I think about, like, you know, the kaijus and, like, the submarine. If anything, we're talking about, like, vehicles like the Highwind. I'm thinking about the submarine stuff, to be able to explore the ocean, more than I'm thinking about snowboarding. Like, I hope they, like, fix the minigame and make it really fun to play. It's similar to, like, the Chocobo racing in Rebirth. I thought it was really damn fun. I've just always been, like, super, super hot fucking trash at the snowboarding minigame in the original FF7. Like, absolutely fucking terrible. The most embarrassing thing you've ever witnessed. I don't know if it's just me, if it's the mechanics of the original FF7, but from a kid until now, in my fucking 30s, I'm hitting every damn tree, every obstacle on the way down the mountain to the Great Glacier. And in fact, I think about the Great Glacier more than I think about the snowboarding, because, like, I know a lot of people don't like the Great Glacier, and it is, like, obviously a bit of a confusing area, but that's what I'm excited for. Like, how the fuck are they going to handle the Great Glacier in the next game? Rebirth director Naoki Hamaguchi says Chadley became a really interesting character when exploring his background, and that he was originally a minor character with one quest. As they were digging into who he was, they felt he needed a bigger role. And they further add with a quote tweet, Hamaguchi says there are plenty of other new characters as well, such as Roche. He hopes people like this guy in the same way people like Chadley. Who the fuck likes Chadley? I'm sort of kidding, of course. There are, like, Chadley defenders out there, and I've said it before on the channel. Like, I didn't mind him in Remake. I thought he was an interesting character in the first game. A little too much in the second game. Like, he's at the forefront. He's one of the most important characters if you think about all the time we spend with him. And I don't think he's that interesting of a character to be at the front of any of the fucking games. I still think that, like, every single world intel thing in Rebirth had to be, like, tied back to Chadley. Like, why can't we just, like, discover things in the world? And it's just like any other like open world game. Like, you have POIs and collectibles in the world and you grab them. And it's not for, like, a particular character usually. It's just a thing. It's like a checklist you do, right? Like, I don't think it all had to be tied back to Chadley. And I just hope they dial it back a bit in the next game, right? Like, I think there's an interesting story there with the character. He's obviously an android created by Hojo or whatever, and, like, the theory of, like, we're gathering all this information for him, and he's gonna be, like, the super boss at the end of the game, into the third game or whatever. Like, that's interesting, right? I just don't need to, like, talk to the goddamn character all the fucking time, bro. He's in every goddamn town we go. Yoshinori Katase says they were asking themselves how to recreate the scene with Aerith in the Forgotten Capital in a modern way. What they wanted to show in the original game was the feeling of loss and grief when you lose someone dear to you. Katase says they changed how the scene was depicted in the remake series. Rather than focusing completely on that idea of loss and grief, they tried to change the angle and looked at how Cloud couldn't let go of his feelings towards people he loved and lost. Kitase says the scene they made for FF7 Rebirth has changed somewhat in the way people react to the same scene from the original. People will see it and interpret it in different ways, and everyone will come out with a slightly different view of what went on. So yeah, the kind of ending sequence and Air's fate is something we talked about quite a bit post-Rebirth. My thoughts and opinions and stuff haven't really changed on that. I think it's one of the biggest kind of missteps with the game. I don't think it's necessarily vague what they do at the end, because I think for me and a lot of people out there, it's pretty clear that she's dead. But because they have the scenes of like Cloud interacting and talking with Aerith, there's a lot of people out there who still defend the possibility that she is alive, like fully alive, or at the very least alive in a different like world or something. One of the worlds that's inside the planet or whatever, which is still within the planet, which is in the live stream. So alive is, I guess relative, whatever. But still, like the kind of like what they do at the ending sequence is just kind of weird. I don't know. Like I don't know why you don't just commit to killing her or commit to her being alive if she's alive in some way. Something I feel like they struggled with a bit when it came to Rebirth with like the emotional moments in the game, and there are some that are effective, and for me personally it was pretty much just like the Barrett related stuff. But like, the ending sequence with like Cloud and Aerith, because they're like toying with like this, is she alive, is she dead, Cloud's talking to her, whatever. Like I didn't ever get like emotionally impacted by it. I mean, I knew it was coming, but regardless, like I wasn't like emotionally invested, if that makes any sense, I guess. I don't know. And even with like the Dying and Barrett segment, that did hit me emotionally. I did get, some teary eyes going and stuff like that. But before we can even really let like the tragedy of the situation set in, Palmer shows up on a giant yellow frog mech and is shaking his ass in the camera. And it's like, what are we doing? Like, there's some weird missteps here and there with Rebirth. There's just something off on certain parts of Rebirth. I don't know what it is. And like, I love the character of Aerith in the first game a lot. I really liked Aerith. And then like, there's just like this weird change in the second game. I don't know if it's the writing, if it's the story direction, if it's me potentially, I don't know. Like, but just, and like them taking away like Aerith's like future vision kind of powers and stuff like that. Like, we get to the end of Remake and then those are just gone, and she's like a complete different character going into the second game. And I don't know. And it's not like me knowing that she was gonna die changed how I felt emotionally, because I knew like Jesse and Biggs and Wedge were supposed to die in the first game, and the Jesse scene when I first played it fucking destroyed me in Remake. And I'm supposed to care more about fucking Aerith than I do Jesse, and I didn't. And I don't know why that is. And look, I don't want to spend like too much time on this because we've talked about the ending a decent amount over the last like several months. And I know like a lot of people left in my comments that they were emotionally impacted by it. They cried and stuff at the ending. That's fantastic. I wish I cried. I enjoy when something hits me emotionally, but I just didn't. And I just feel like it would have been a better ending if they like committed more on one side or the other of her like fate, right? Instead of trying to like ride the middle ground of like what exactly happened to Aerith. Like we were all hoping that like because of what was being said throughout the game with like Zack and like Aerith sleeping or unconscious on the bed, like that she would die at the end, at the hands of Sephiroth and shit, and then maybe she'd wake up in that world with Zack. And if they showed that at the end, I think it would have been a better ending to some degree, to seeing like that, even if you don't see them actually interact. Like, you just see like Aerith wake up in the bed and then roll the credits or something like that. Or like a post-credit scene, she wakes up and then it goes to black and we just gotta wait till the next game to get that like Zack and Aerith interaction. Just something along those lines, right? Some sort of like conclusive whatever's going on with Aerith, instead of this like attempting to be vague thing. I don't know. Anyways, whatever, let's move on. Last up here for the video is what I think was like the most popular kind of like trending tweet making the rounds yesterday. FF7 Rebirth director Hamaguchi says they're going to make the third game something that even beats any expectations you have, and that it will be one of the most loved and most popular games in the history of video games once again. So it's obviously quite the bold claim, but I do have full confidence in them only because we've seen them do that with Remake to Rebirth, right? And if they could do a similar jump, a similar leap in like gaming experience and like fun and other stuff like that, right, from Rebirth to the third game, then yeah, like it's gonna be like way better, right, with the Highwind and fighting the weapons and being able to explore the world and explore the ocean and so on and so forth. Like, there's every possibility to make that game way better than Rebirth. I mean, essentially just do what Rebirth did, but bigger and better, right? That's all you gotta do. And it's very simple to say, but that's really all you gotta do. Just give us like the Rebirth experience again, tweak what needs to be tweaked, and then add, the Highwind and be able to explore the world type shit. And the Highwind's like the main focus for a lot of people. It's what I see a lot of the community talking about, right? It's what we're all kind of curious how they're going to handle. We know you can fly around and explore the world and shit, but like, to what degree? Can I land anywhere? Do I hover over a spot and like it just drops me on the ground there type shit? Or do I actually land the Highwind, walk out of the fucking Highwind, and then go explore the world? Like, how are they going to do that exactly? That's something we're all kind of fucking curious about. Pretty much it for like all the major information that's out there, at least from like Shinra Arch and similar accounts that have put out information. It's the same shit we talked about in this video. There was a few that we didn't look at. There's another one that's like a thread about like the changes they're doing to the remake project, and it brought up the ending and what's really going on. I feel like we didn't have to read that because it's just the same thing we already read previously. There's a few others here, and there's another thread about like Sephiroth characterization and stuff that didn't really have anything new. that I didn't think we need to talk about. So we pretty much covered everything. Having said that, though, we didn't really talk about like that much shit in this video in terms of like the 2.5 hour VODs that are available. So we might have to check that shit out for sure in the coming days or so. All in all, though, this was like a great like bit of information. We got like a ton of shit for part 3. In fact, it's kind of like what the whole video is about for the most part, was part 3, right? So it's kind of cool to see them talk about that game that much, even though they're not really giving us like a ton of information that's like spoilery or anything. Just like telling us like what's going on with the game, kind of where they're at in development, like the Highwind or whatever is kind of nice. Of course, my dudes, that'll be pretty much the video. Pass off to you guys. We talked about a lot of different things in this video. Just what are your overall thoughts? The hype for part 3 is still very much there, of course. And if you guys are interested in me, you know, covering like the whole video, the whole VOD of like the panel or whatever, let me know for sure. Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe channel if you guys are new. Just works in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @YT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.